Yes. Fine, thank you. On behalf of my Deputy Convener and myself, can I give you a very warm welcome to Falkirk Council's Planning Pre-Determination hearing this evening. In accordance with Section 43 of the Local Government in Scotland Act 2003, it has been directed that this meeting will be conducted in such as a manner to allow remote attendance by elected members. The meeting will be live streamed via the council website. So we'll go straight away. Apologies, any apologies intimated?
Yes, we've got Councillor Claire Mackey-Brown. You hear me, Convener?
Yes, indeed.
And
Councillor Steinbank, I believe.
Councillor Steinbank, he submitted his apologies yesterday. Okay?
Yes.
Fine.
We have.
Pardon?
Oh, sorry. We have Karen Strang here, who's an additional person to your list. That's right, Karen. Susan White was appearing. Are you instead of Susan?
Yeah, instead of Susan. Susan's unwell at the moment.
Right. Thank you.
Karen Strang.
Instead of Susan White. Yeah. Okay, thank you, Tonya.
Thank you.
Okay then, well that takes us to item 2 on your agenda, which is declaration of interest. And just for clarity, I'll read this out. Members should declare any financial and non-financial interest they have in any item of business at the meeting, identifying the relevant agenda item and the nature of the interest. Have we any declarations of interest at this time?
No, Convener.
None recorded? Fine, thank you. Before we go into the procedures, I think it would be beneficial if we just check to make sure who's on stream. We've had the members. I'm just going as Mr. Jones, the agent. Mr. Jones is here.
Yes.
Mr. Jones, just confirm you're here.
Yes.
Thank you. John Anslow, convener of the 8th Parish Community Council.
Present.
Present, thank you, sir. Louise Blank, Senior Planning Officer.
Yes, I'm here. Yeah.
Thank you. Kevin Collins, Transport Planning Coordinator.
Yes, I'm here, Convener.
Thank you. Crawford, Civil Environmental Protection Officer. Crawford. Okay, we'll move on. Robert Smith, Secretary, 8th Parish Community Council.
Present.
Okay, thank you, sir. Craig Russell, Senior Roads Development Officer.
Here, Convener.
Fine, thank you, sir. And we've had Susan White's not coming, but we'll get Karen in her place. Stuart Maxwell, National Trust for Scotland.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Thomas Luke, NHS Forth Valley. No, we'll move on. Objectives, we'll get Graham Henderson.
Yes, present, Convener.
Thank you. George Laurie. George Laurie, no.
Convener, if George and Shona aren't present, then I have received a list of their points of view, which I could read in their absence if they don't appear.
Okay, well, we'll plenty of opportunity to come back just in case they do come in. Susan Williamson. Or Suzanne Williamson. No. Martin Williamson.
Again, Convener, I have some of Suzanne's points as well. If Suzanne can't make it, then I could read Suzanne's points as well.
Okay, thank you. Pauline Roger. No. Stuart MacDonald.
I'm here.
Okay, thank you, sir. That takes it to officers confirming attendance. Ian Henderson, Legal Services Manager.
Present, thank you, Convener.
Brian Perry, Democratic Service Manager.
Present.
Jack Frawley, Team Leader, Committee Services.
Present.
Thank you, Jack. Antonia Subarai, Committee Services Officer.
Present.
Ian Dryden, Development Manager, Growth Planning and Climate.
Present, Convener.
Brett Vivian, Senior Planning Officer.
Present.
Bernard Whittle, Acting Development and Building Standards Manager. No, okay, that's fine. Okay, thank you for that. next part of the agenda is item 3, which is the predetermination hearing procedures. And just for clarity, I'm going to take my time going through these because, as you know, there are quite a new number of members that's on the planning committee, and this is the very first predetermination hearing. So we're not going to rush. We're not going to rush anything. We're going to make sure that everybody's well aware. So there's been a formal welcome by the convener, and the order of proceedings and procedures to be followed at the hearing are going to be explained at the moment. And I'm going to go through them just. Okay, Brian, you got them up there?
Yeah.
The first part will be the convener will ask the relevant officer from the council to present the report relating to the planning proposal. We've done that.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on. The next one is the convener will invite the applicant or their agent and any statutory consultees to speak in relation to the proposal. The applicant or their agent will normally be entitled to speak for 10 minutes, whereas statutory consultees will normally be entitled to speak for up to 5 minutes. Okay. The members of the committee will be invited to question the applicant, agent, statutory consultees, and may seek guidance on factual or legal matters from the officers after each presentation. Thank you. The convener will invite other persons who have submitted representations, including the objectors or supporters, to speak to the terms of their representations submitted in response to the planning proposal. Each party will normally be permitted to address the committee once for up to 5 minutes, so as to avoid repetition. Where parties have a similar interest or objection, a spokesperson will be invited to speak on behalf of the group. In these circumstances, the spokesperson will normally be permitted to speak for up to 10 minutes. The convener may limit the number of speakers addressing the hearing on any particular topic or may curtail any speech which repeats any matter on which the hearing has already been addressed. Thank you, Brian. The applicant and or agent will have a right of reply to any points raised by any party heard by the committee. The members of the committee will be invited to question any party heard by the committee or may seek guidance on factual or legal matters from council officers after each presentation. Members of the committee may identify any other planning issues that they will wish to see addressed in the report to the meeting of council that will consider the application. Then the convener will close the predetermination hearing. It's worthwhile noting at this minute that no decision is taken here this evening. A decision will be taken at a future planning committee. There will be an opportunity for a site visit later on that will be discussed, but at this present time, just to make everybody sure that members that are here tonight are here on a fact-finding mission, and the wording is quite clear. Predetermination hearing procedures. Members are here to hear all parties and ask any questions of any party, including council officers, to ensure that they are fully versed before the meeting takes place where a decision will be taken. Thank you. Before I ask Bernard Whittle to come in and give us a report, I think it's worthwhile stating quite clearly that members of the previous planning committee will recall that a predetermination hearing for this application was held on the 20th of January 2022. The reason for the predetermination hearing was because the application is a major development that is significantly contrary to the local development plan LDP2, owing to the scale of the proposed housing out with the earth village limits within the countryside and the impact of the proposed development on the historic environment, Dunmore Park and the Pineapple Design landscape. At this hearing on the 20th of January 22, the committee identified a range of matters that they would like to see addressed in the report for a further planning meeting. Due to ongoing considerations, it was too late to report back to the last planning meeting prior to the local elections. The planning committee now has a number of new members who were not previously on the committee and present at previous PDHs for this application. It is now necessary to hold a second predetermination hearing to allow the newly constructed planning committee the opportunity to go through the full procedures before a planning decision is taken. I've had a number of people that have contacted me asking why that we had another predetermination hearing after we've already went through one, and that is the reason. It's now an opportunity for our officer from the council, Brent Vivian, to give us a summary of the report and the application in front of us. Thank you, Brent.
Thank you, Convener. This application seeks planning permission in principle for the erection of a visitor centre and 82 2 and 3 bedroom bungalows. A plus 55 age occupancy restriction is proposed for the houses. The houses are intended as enabling development to cross-fund provision of the visitor centre. The principal use proposed for the visitor centre is a cafe, with other uses indicated as a tourist information and display area, an arts and craft workshop, and a retail area. Ian, can I ask you to bring up the drawings and photos, and we can have a look at them? The first one to bring up is the master plan, please. It's not sure. All right, hold on. Okay, thanks, Ian. Apologies for the delay there. That's right. This is the northern part of the master plan drawing, showing the proposed visitor centre location and associated car parking area to the north of the B9124 near the A905, with access via a new roundabout on the A905 and realignment of the B9124 off the new roundabout and swinging southwards to join the existing alignment of the B9124. It also, you'll notice a purple line, which is a proposed new pedestrian path from the proposed visitor centre to the Pineapple to the north. If you could scroll down in, we can pick up on the housing area as well. So the housing area is shown as a long ribbon of development partly adjoining a housing development currently under construction. It spreads from the B9124 to the north and to Earth Main's farm buildings and Douglas Avenue to the south. If you just scroll down there, and we can see the extent of the proposed housing. It consists of 4 housing clusters, each comprising around 20 houses. So cluster 4 is at the southern end, and that backs onto Douglas Avenue and also sits between Douglas Avenue and the existing farm buildings at Earth Mains. And if you could bring up, there's two visuals that I'd like to show, 3D visuals. These give an idea of what the visitor centre might look like. So that's the first one, and there's another one as well. Okay, thank you. There's also 3 photos that I'll show. These are photos taken from the private road to the Pineapple, looking into the site of the proposed visitor centre. Yeah, you can bring that one up first. Thank you. That's a view from the private road looking north towards the Pineapple, with the site of the proposed visitor centre on the right hand side. And the next one. Just above. Yep. So that one's looking from the private road across the open field where the proposed visitor centre would be located, towards the A905. And the last one, it's just the next one above. And that one's looking from the proposed road across the field where the visitor centre would be located, towards, in a southward direction towards the Earth Village. Right, thanks, Ian. Just returning to the report, the previous report, the previous hearing included a detailed description of the proposal, a list of the information accompanying the application, details of the previous planning approval for the site, a summary of the consultation responses and public representations, including the position of the Earth Parish Community Council, a list of the relevant positions, relevant policies of the local development plan, which the application will be assessed against, and relevant aspects of Scottish planning policy. The report recorded that 153 public representations had been received, consisting of 81 representations in support, 67 objections, and 5 neutral representations. The wide-ranging points raised in the representations were summarised in the report. In addition, the report recorded that the Earth Parish Community Council had decided to take a neutral stance. In terms of the consultation responses, it was noted that National Trust for Scotland had objected to the application. Historic Environment Scotland and the Council's Museum Services had concerns regarding impacts on the design landscape. The Council's Engineering Design Unit had concerns regarding the connectivity of the proposed visitor centre to the village for pedestrians due to the narrowness of the footway along the A905. The Council's Children's Services had advised that Earth Primary School would have capacity to accommodate any pupils from the proposed development, and a developer contribution would be required towards addressing future capacity issues at Larvitt High School if there was to be no occupancy restriction imposed in relation to school-aged children. NHS Forth Valley advised that the Earth Health Centre had capacity to serve the proposed development, and District Valuer Services had advised that the proposed scale of housing would generate a developer profit in the region of 9 to 11%, which is less than the industry standard of in the region of 20%, but some developers may accept a lesser profit rate, especially, for example, in this case, as the developer intends to operate the cafe as an ongoing concern as a family business. At the previous hearing, the committee agreed to carry out an unaccompanied site visit to view the physical characteristics of the site and surrounds. The site visit took place on the 31st of January earlier this year. The matters identified at the previous hearing that the committee wished further information on are summarised in paragraph 6 of the report prepared for this evening's hearing, and they relate to education, healthcare, equality issues, housing need, the proposed age occupancy restriction, the business case for the proposed visitor centre, landscape and visual impacts, environmental impact on the pineapple, protected species, the local development plan history for the site, and there was also a request for further information from the National Trust. In response to those matters, the applicant has submitted further information since the previous hearing, which includes a solicitor letter in respect of the proposed age occupancy restriction and the equalities legislation, a business plan, an amended master plan, a cycling and walking addendum, and a visitor and natural asset plan. Paragraph 8 of the report prepared for this evening's hearing sets out information in response to the matters highlighted by committee at the previous hearing. It's quite extensive. There's a number of comments there that you'll see in paragraph 8 of the report. In addition, since the previous hearing, 2 further representations in support of the application and 1 further objection have been received. Points raised in those further representations are summarised in paragraph 9 of the report prepared for this evening's hearing. I might also add at this point that a further letter was received from the National Trust on the 30th of August, advising that they had reviewed the further information submitted by the applicant since the last hearing, and they retain their objection to the application. Finally, convener, I would advise that this report provides factual and background information in relation to the proposed development and should be read in conjunction with the report prepared for the previous hearing. No planning assessment of the proposal is included or implied in this report. This will be prepared in due course after this evening's predetermination hearing. Thank you, convener.
Thank you very much for that, Brent. It's now an opportunity for the agent, I believe David Jones, to speak on behalf of the application. You'll have 10 minutes to speak. If you could just introduce yourself, Mr. Jones, to the committee, who you're representing, and then you have 10 minutes. There'll also be an opportunity later on for members to come back and ask you any questions. Okay? Thank you, sir. You're on mute, sir. We can't hear you, Mr. Jones. You're on mute. I think you're froze as well.
No.
No.
Can you hear me now, convener?
Yes, indeed. Thank you, sir. 10 minutes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, convener, and good evening, everyone. My name's David Jones, and I'm agent for this planning application. This revised planning permission in principle application follows a June 2020 committee minded to grant decision for a larger visitor centre stroke retail building and 22 bungalows, later withdrawn. So let me briefly remind ourselves why this revised development proposal is needed, how we intend to deliver the project, and finally, I'll turn to matters raised at the previous hearing. Falkirk has never been more popular as a destination. It already has iconic tourist attractions in the Kelpies, Falkirk Wheel and Calendar House. The Falkirk and Rosebank distilleries are further welcome additions to its cultural and heritage trails and see the establishment of a visitor centre close to the Pineapple Heritage Resource as extending and enhancing this tourism interest in the area. The centre will provide jobs and bring additional revenue to the village, enhancing tourism both locally and across the whole of the Falkirk area. At present, casual visitors to the Pineapple currently have no facilities, restricted accessibility and no means to stay longer than the time it takes to see the iconic structure. The visitor centre will allow longer stays, provide cafe, washroom facilities, interpretive stroke exhibition displays, safe access for all, and provide a focus for greater economic activity in relation to jobs and support for local suppliers. The Visitor Centre Cafe will also provide a destination for many local cyclists, walkers and residents. In June 2019, Regional Director Mr. Neil Christensen of Visit Scotland stated that it is encouraging to see these plans and share the belief that an investment such as this has the potential to enhance the visitor experience for Falkirk, which is currently experiencing significant growth in visitor numbers and investment in visitor experience through attractions, accommodations and experiences. The Dunmore Pineapple and the surrounding area has always been an area of interest for visitors, but to date has perhaps been underutilised due to lack of visitor experience. Therefore, any enhancement in associated infrastructure at this location would be a good thing for the area's offering. Currently, there are no organisations, agency or private developer proposing to improve the visitor experience for the Pineapple, which most neutral observers would agree falls some way short of that offered at other places of visitor interest in the Falkirk area. Improved signage, road and parking facilities, along with public transport stop, washroom facilities, cafe, exhibition, interpretive space and arts and craft workshop. These facilities come at a price, however, and whilst the applicant has demonstrated that the visitor centre will be sustainable long term from the proposed family cafe business operation, the capital funding required to meet infrastructure, building costs and planning obligations require enabling development in the form of 82 bungalows, 21 of which is required to meet the council's affordable housing policy. The initial application in principle supported by the committee in June 2020 was prepared on the basis of a visitor centre containing a wider range of commercial stroke retail activity, requiring less cross-funding to build and support the visitor centre development long term. However, in recognition of current trends, the retail space has been reduced, resulting in a smaller building footprint, leaving cafe, exhibition, interpretive space and arts and craft workshop as the predominant uses, very much in scale with the Kelpies Visitor Centre building. This reduction in commercial activity, aligned to the extensive list of financial obligations associated with the committee's early decision, rendered the initial development proposals unviable. The present number of supporting bungalows allows the centre to proceed covering all building and infrastructure costs while meeting known obligations in respect of affordable housing contributions towards public transport, open space and provision of roundabout site access onto the A905. It is intended that the supporting bungalow development will be progressed in stages linked to the construction and completion of the visitor centre and associated infrastructure. We know from the officer's report that a need exists for this type of accommodation, and the development will contribute to meeting an identified shortfall in Falkirk's effective housing land supply. The council's latest land audit in June of 22 points to a current shortfall of 122 units in the effective supply. Turning to the previous hearing. In response to issues raised at the previous hearing, we have provided additional further information which we trust will help members in their deliberations. Let me now briefly turn to these matters. Proposed age occupancy restriction. We have presented legal advice to the council confirming that such a restriction is legitimate in terms of the Equalities Act, is enforceable by burden within the property title, and in regular use by developers McCarthy and Stone. There are numerous examples of where this has been applied by McCarthy and Stone, and the nearest one that I can think of at the moment is Wellside Place in Falkirk. Our business case for the cafe enterprise has been reviewed by the council's Business Gateway Service and considered fair and reasonable. The scale of enabling development is directly related to development costs and has independently been assessed by the district valuer, who concluded that a greater housing component, a total of 148 units, would be required if site acquisition and standard industry operating profit were to be applied. The applicants are already landowners and will be owner-operators of the cafe and the visitor centre. For the past 10 years, the applicants have operated a successful cafe coffee shop at Sutra Farm on the A68 in Midlothian, and see this, the cafe at Canada Wood, the Smitty Blair Drummond and Craigie's South Queensferry as great examples of what can be achieved. In relation to landscape and visual impact, our professionally prepared study incorporates 13 viewpoints of the application site from the surrounding area, concluding that the development will have minimal visual impact on the area and buildings once mitigating planting is mature. The extensive woodlands surrounding Dunmore provides a strong barrier preventing any visual or physical coalescence between settlements.
Minute to go, sir.
Thank you. I'm winding up, convener. Impact on protected services. Our submitted ecological study considers there to be no adverse impact on protected species. A development method statement is included with the submission recommending autumn and winter construction period. In relation to the local plan history, since the limited representations made to the LDP2 process, the applicant has provided a substantial body of evidence, 16 detailed studies in total in respect of site mitigation, environment, heritage considerations and project information to support the development. In relation to the National Trust, the recently prepared Visitor Natural Asset Plan in consultation with NTS provides a working arrangement in relation to visitor management issues such as signage, interpretive information, provision of dedicated footway and future site maintenance matters. This work has been undertaken on a cooperative basis with the Trust, despite their more recent objection in principle to the proposals. That practical support, however, for the management of future visitors to the Pineapple from the Visitor Centre by the Trust is welcome and should allay any concerns regarding shared operational matters should the committee be minded once again to support the application. In relation to walking and cycling, our document provides further evidence of the growing interest in walking and cycling and how the visitor centre and CAF would link into the area's extensive foot and cycleways, much like that at Canada Wood. Forth Bikes already manage a network of electric bike hubs hiring to visitors and residents across Forth Valley. There is currently a gap between Falkirk and Stirling, and they see the Earth Centre as a welcome addition to their network. The Helix Around Town Tour, the Heart Route, is Falkirk's own cycling route, showcasing the many highlights on offer in the 20-mile loop on mainly traffic-free roads. Linking the Earth Centre to the Helix, Kelpies, Falkirk Wheel and Calendar Park is only to be welcomed, and the applicants are committed to working with Forth Bikes to establish such a facility. So too with walking, councillor. The council website already lists a number of walks around Earth area, including 2 circular walks from the Pineapple. The visitor centre would provide convenient starting point with safe parking, CAF and washroom facilities similar to that at Calendar Wood, albeit in an area less challenging terrain and more convenient to residents north side of Falkirk. Thank you, convener.
No, thank you very much, sir. Apologies if you think that in terms of procedure we've got to ensure that we're timious for everything. You had nearly 12 minutes there, so thank you. Obviously there's going to be an opportunity for members to ask any questions in relation to what you've just told us. But first of all, we're going to go through the confirmed attendance by the consultees to see if they want to have any input at this stage before we bring members of the committee in. I'll go to John Onslow, convener of Airth Parish Community Council. Have you anything to say at this time, sir?
Convener, are we going to speak later or would you like it now?
We'll like it now. Fine, thank you.
Right, no problem at all. Yes, I'm the convener of the Airth Parish Community Council, and this application in one form or another has been going on for a while. For the Community Council and for Airth, the solution or the provision of a visitor centre is essential. That area gets very dangerous on Saturday and Sundays with the amount of traffic and other issues in that area. The junctions are not meant for it, and coaches simply cannot attend to go around the Pineapple itself. So the Community Council were very much in support of the original application, and I think we said that at the time. When the second application came back, the visitor centre was a little smaller, but perhaps more economically viable. I can't say, I don't run visitor centres, but the Community Council felt that the amount of the increase in the housing was quite a bit, and there was a bit more discussion about the balance between the two. Because the Community Council was not really sure, we wanted to have a public meeting, but were unable to do so at that time. So we decided that we would remain largely, we wouldn't support it or condemn it for what it was asking for. We would leave that with the council. Thank you, Convener.
Okay, thank you very much for your contribution, sir. There will be an opportunity for members to ask any questions of the agent or consultees, so somebody may come back. And we're going now to Robert Smith, Secretary, Airth Parish Community Council. Robert, have you any summary or like to speak in any way?
I've nothing to add to what John Onslow has said.
Okay, thank you, sir. That takes us to Stuart Maxwell, National Trust for Scotland. Stuart, would you like to come in?
Yeah, I can summarise our objection. I'm not going to go through the whole letter. Just firstly, apologise for the lateness of our second letter, which only came in the 30th of August. Yeah, we're objecting, the Scottish planning policy, section 148 against gardens and underlying landscapes. This sits within Dunmore Park. We're objecting because of the impact on the pineapple and walled gardens, Grade A listed structures. Again, it's contrary to Scottish planning policy, section 141, and it's not compatible with the local development plan. And I think that the only other concern we had is the running of a visitor centre. We just want to make it clear it's not the National Trust for Scotland Visitor Centre. We care for the pineapple, but as the agent has pointed out, we have no plans to develop there just now. And in fairness, we have worked well with the agent and the applicant and their consultants, Ironside Farrer, to produce the latest report. So in summary, our biggest concerns are, it's contrary to planning, but also is the visitor centre sustainable? We have experience of running visitor centres and would question whether it's actually sustainable with a footfall. And that's it in summary.
Okay, thank you very much, Stuart. Is Thomas Luke from NHS Forth Valley with us? Thomas Luke? No?
No, Convener.
We'll take it. Lewis Long, Senior Planning Officer, Planning and Environment. Have you anything to say at this time? Louise?
Sorry, I couldn't get my mic on. No, I've nothing further to add at this stage, no.
Okay, thank you very much. Kevin Collins, Transport Planning Coordinator, anything to say at this stage?
Nothing to add at this stage, Convener.
Thank you, sir. Proper Civil Environmental Protection Officer, have you anything to say at this stage, sir?
I don't think he's turned up at any time, Convener.
No, here. Okay, thank you. Craig Russell, Senior Roads Development Officer. Craig, anything to say at this stage?
Nothing to add, convener.
Nothing to add, that's fine, thank you, sir. Well, Susan White's not here, but Karen's here. Service Development Officer, Housing Communities. Anything to say at this stage, Karen?
The only points I have, 2 points, that the need for affordable housing in the area, and there's a need for wheelchair accessible housing. That's all.
Okay, thank you for that. There's now an opportunity for members of the committee. You've heard, first of all, the agent speaking, and you've heard some of the consultees. So you have an opportunity to ask any questions of any of them. So is there any member, have you maybe put your hands up and easily distinguish you? Councillor Redmond, you got a question for who?
The question is for David Jones.
Yep.
Agent. I was just picking up on a point you said about age restrictions. You're saying it's used by McCarthy and Stone. Does that mean that, are you saying that people maybe younger than 50 wouldn't be allowed to buy these houses or something? Or
Yes, convener.
did I pick that up right?
Yeah. Mr. Jones will explain this situation, which is quite important. Mr. Jones.
Yes, convener, that is the case. These properties are designed for both in terms of purchase and living for 55 and above age group.
Right. I don't know. It's just you know, kind of following on from Cam's point there, like about the need for affordable housing and then also disabled access housing. I don't think it's very fair if we've got somebody in the Falkirk area under 55 in a wheelchair to say to them, you know, they couldn't buy this house. I don't know. I take a bit of a problem with that. You know, you need to be
Jack,
over 55.
as I stated at the beginning, this is a hearing for us to learn and
all right.
it's not today. It's not really an opportunity to maybe come forward with your own interpretation. It's what being said.
Right.
Really,
just saying, but is that in the planning application, or is that just the idea?
That is in the planning application, and it's a point that will be brought up by many people in relation to, because it's anti-discriminatory or whatever. But I think the agent has explained it. But your question's been answered there, Jack. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Murtagh.
Thanks, convener. And I think obviously there were many points and questions from the previous report that have been updated in this report, but obviously many of them are to be explained in the further planning report. So the questions that I've got for the developer, for the agent here, it was mainly one you mentioned in the submission, the recent submission, basically about the kind of walking statement and cycling statement and open space policy. One of the things, obviously, we won't see maybe we won't see the detail and assessment of that until the report. So I'm not trying to cross-examine on it, but I wondered what when you're talking about the support of the visitor centre, obviously. Allowing more people to visit the Pineapple as the historic monument adjacent to it, although not connected. Even from a sort of point of view of the National Trust land being limited on that site, on the Dunmore Park sort of designed landscape, have you had any further dialogue with the adjacent landowners in terms of, you know, at the moment the Pineapple, if you like, is used to access the wider woodland area, so there's the kind of concern about the historic design landscape, and you mentioned the woodland walks, etc. Have you had any dialogue with, you know, the other landowners or the land users, and consulted with how people use the Pineapple? You were saying you gave an impression about how people use the Pineapple currently. Have you done any consultation about how people use the Pineapple currently and how the surrounding landscape will be affected?
Thank you, Councillor. We've been in discussion with the National Trust, who are custodians of the Pineapple itself, and our consultants in preparing the report have analysed the situation in terms of service users and visitors to the area. On that basis, they produced this document, which we work with along with colleagues at the NTS. And they would seem quite happy in terms of what we were proposing. The impact on the network, if I can call it that, was deemed to be a relatively small number of percentage of visitors to the centre itself. And that's based on surveys and information that was given to us from examples elsewhere. So on that basis, and if your question was all about would it have a significant adverse effect on existing uses and the infrastructure that's there at the moment, I think in short the answer is no. But mitigation measures that we're bringing forward through this specialist study would help ease that usage and provide some comfort in relation to the adjoining owners, that's the trust, and ourselves, on the basis of people visiting the area.
Okay, I suppose, and thank you for that answer, and perhaps if that information is made available as well, the basis of those studies, you know, could help us when we come to our deliberations at committee. I suppose my question is not so much just, I know the site very well, I live very close by. I suppose it's knowing that this site, yes, the pipe you're mentioning the landowners and the pine and the National Trust owning the pineapple, but this site obviously extends all the way from the castle area at the top of the hill all the way down and over, and then it's the pineapple is currently used as an access point not just to the pineapple but to the whole network, as you put it, in Dunmore Park. So it's whether you've had any dialogue with the wider users of that whole network area about how that's used, not so much the impact on the users, but the impact on the local environment and the impact on the land management. If you're going to increase the footfall, and that's the intention of having the visitor centre, have you done any assessment about how that increase in visitor numbers will impact on the biodiversity, etc.? You yourself, we'll get a report in committee what officers think, but have you done any assessment of that yourselves?
Not me personally, but that was all part of the background work that was provided by our own consultants in doing so. The report has been made available to officers, and I'm sure you'll get a breakdown in terms of how that's been assessed. But I personally have not been involved in further discussions with any other users in that location.
Okay, my only other question, Convener, because and obviously we'll get that information in the report and be able to look at that, and I can perhaps ask officers to make sure that the basis of what your consultants have said is included for us, so we can look at it. It was asked for in the previous report about some clarification on the National Trust's view on it, and it's welcome the National Trust are here and they've given it a brief outline. But I suppose what was quite important, quite confusing, was the kind of contrary statements that were in the previous report, that when the original planning application came forward, it seemed that it said that the National Trust were in favour of the original one. That was then contradicted. And then there was a kind of, I suppose what I'm trying to ask is that, can you give an account of how that relationship developed and why there was this misunderstanding or ambiguity about the National Trust supporting the application when that appears not to have been the case?
Thank you, Convener, and I'm more than happy to do so. In short, there's been a change of personnel at the Trust. Way back when we first discussed and made contact with the Trust, I have a document here dated 13th of August 2019, and this was sent to me from Mr. Patrick Duffy, who was Chief Operating Officer at the Trust at that time. If I can just quote from this document, thank you very much, David, for our meeting and discussion. I appreciate you will need to pursue the planning process and best wishes with that. I think from the Trust's perspective, as I said at an earlier meeting, it has nothing to be concerned with in terms of the centre's design or impact. Infrastructure is important and the ecological impact too. Thank you for your assurances on these matters. That was the point when we drafted our second set of proposals dealing with what we have before us just now. And it was a great surprise to us that in January of this year that we saw a letter of objection from the letter of objection in principle from the new trust managers. So it came as a bit of a shock, and it's not something that we'd be led to believe that was indeed be indeed the case. However, since then, you've had an update both from your officers, and I've given you a brief insight as to how we've produced our further submission in relation to this contact point between the trust and ourselves. Hopefully, we're resting on the basis that the trust have an objection in principle at this stage, which wasn't initially with us when we started this project. And you've heard from the representative tonight, Mr. Stuart Maxwell, that we've had a good working relationship in dealing with, if you like, the operational issues of having a visitor centre and what would be required in terms of pedestrian or additional visitor management. I can't say any more than that. I wasn't party to these changes at the trust, but it came as a change of tack of which we were not party to.
Thanks for your answer, and thanks, convener. I know that, and it's extraordinarily important that there's no cross-examination in this hearing, and I don't wish to, but I suppose it will be important to establish from the trust point of view their view on that also. So I could ask the same question of the trust, but maybe perhaps just ask officers that when this report, I mean, I know we will ask formally, but there is, to Mr. Jones, there is a little bit of ambiguity which still confuses me, because what the reporter originally said and what that's in our report tonight about what, even when the original site was considered, and what the reporter had said in reference to having it included in LDP2 seems to say that there was no evidence of any existing or any discussion with the trust, and I think that's where it's confusing for us to have that in black and white in our report.
Sorry, convener, can I just add a little bit more to that? At the time that we made representations to the reporter under the LDP2 process, we hadn't taken any detailed steps in relation to making our submissions. Our submissions, in truth, were fairly light, as a local plan process tends to be. It's nothing more on a factual basis than an identification of a site and something around a loosely termed set of proposals. I can understand in hindsight why the reporter came to the conclusion he did. But in all fairness, we've produced a body of evidence since then, which takes us way beyond that point of looking at basic concepts to working through detailed difficulties, difficult assessments in relation to additional footfall in the area and potential impact on environmental concerns. So I think we have moved the caravan down the road somewhat in relation to the evidence gathering.
Okay, thanks for that.
Thank you, Councillor Murtagh. An opportunity now for Councillor Gordon Forrest to ask any questions of Officer Brenton in relation to the report or the agent or any consultees. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, convener. My question is to Mr. Jones again, and it's a follow-up on the question that was asked by Councillor Jack Redmond regarding the age restriction within the development. The houses are 2 to 3 bedrooms, I think you said, and as such they could be classed as family homes. Is there a restriction on younger people, sons, daughters, taking the homes at a later date, such as if a parent dies? Is there a restriction on this children actually inheriting those homes?
Well, our legal people have prepared documentation to the effect that this would be a burden on the property title, and any subsequent third-party purchase would be subject to those tests and assessments. So, in short, yes, there would be.
Thank you for that. As an additional one, is there a restriction to any child living with their parents within those homes?
Yes, convener, that would be the case, as McCarthy and Stone use a similar restriction. It would be like for like on that basis.
Yes, I thought as much because I remember a well-known episode regarding a developer that put that in place, and a couple bought the house without telling the developer that they had a grown-up disabled daughter that they looked after, and they were not allowed to actually move in. So thank you for that. The next question I'd like, again, is to yourself, Mr. Jones, is that this is a staged development, in that the further on that the development of the houses go, the further on the visitor centre goes. Is that correct?
Not strictly, no. We are proposing to build the visitor centre as a phase 1 operation. We need the business up and running, and it will be centred around the visitor centre and the cafe, which is going to be central to sustaining the visitor centre long term. So we see that as part of a phase 1 operation. We will have technical discussions with your officers on the basis of a staged release of housing, in order that we can bring in funds to provide the building of the wherewithal to construct the building and the infrastructure that we've talked about.
Oh, thank you, but one is dependent on the other. If the visitor centre cafe does not take off, you won't have the funds to develop the rest of the development.
Well, we put a business case forward to your gateway people. We provided detailed documentation in relation to the costs and the income generated from the various sales of bungalows, and we are confident that we can move this thing forward at the earliest opportunity. We want the visitor centre, we want the cafe, and we see this as central to the project.
I understand that. Thank you for that. The reason I asked was the looming cost of living crisis, which will impinge on everybody's earnings. Thank you for that.
Thank you for your input, Councillor Forrest. Now, Councillor Kerr, I believe, was wanting in for some questions.
Thanks, convener. My first question is to Stuart Maxwell. Hi, Stuart. Hi, Stuart. Stuart, you mentioned the pineapple in the walled garden. Will the visitor centre disturb the pineapple and the visit in the walled gardens, or is it far enough away not to, as in construction?
The construction of it won't. No, I don't see any issue with that, and actually the operation of it won't disturb anything. I think. Whether it will bring many more people, it's debatable. But no, I don't think we've any concerns about the construction of it or the placement of it. It'll actually, I can't see the pineapple being overwhelmed with visitors, so it's not going to cause any issue operationally that way. And yeah, the construction, I'd imagine, will be fairly well contained within its site. So with myself and David have spoken about when we've been on site, so it'll be self-contained. So no concerns there.
Right, okay, just a supplementary question to that then. Obviously you would be over the moon if there was more people visited the pineapple, because it's a magnificent structure. I take it you would be happy with more people.
We'll always be happy with more people. The pineapple for us is a challenge. It's an open site, we don't charge for it. So it's a cost to us, so it runs on deficit.
Yeah.
The actual pineapple structure, which houses holiday let an Airbnb, it's in a 25-year agreement with another trust, so the income from that doesn't come to us either. So the pineapple is quite a resource light but financial, not burden to us. But you know, we don't put any. I don't put any resource there apart from to cut the grass and maintain it. So the only impact that more visitors would have would be potentially more donations, which we would try and obviously we try and convert visitors to members. So there's a plus side to that, and there's a detriment for added litter and use of the grounds. but having more people through the pineapple, even if it's late at night, would actually help with antisocial behaviour we suffer there. So we find when sites have more footfall and are more open and more used, they're cared for by people that visit them. So that's where we're at with the pineapple. And we have a 10-year strategy. We have numerous buildings, and to be honest, the pineapple's not top of our priority to invest in just now. And we wouldn't put a visitor centre there.
Thank you very much, Stuart. That was great. Convener, my next question is to Roads, to Craig. Roads, there, Craig.
Yes, convener, here.
Craig, see that it was mentioned about the roundabout. Would the roundabout and the new road help the traffic coming come through here at that end of the village?
The roundabout, convener, is likely to reduce vehicle speeds on the approach and the approach to Earth and the exit from Earth. That's as concrete as I can be with that statement. It's likely to do that, convener.
Right, thanks very much, Craig. Thanks, convener. That's all the questions I've got at the moment.
Okay, thank you. We'll go Councillor Murphy, go back to you, but first of all, we'll bring in Councillor Bowes.
Thank you, convener. My questions are probably it was one to Stuart, and then I'm going to ask not so much a question, but and I maybe be premature with this, but ask for some information from our Mr. Henderson for the actual committee itself, if that's okay. Stuart, sorry, Mr. Maxwell, I don't know you obviously. Be polite. You spoke earlier, and I accept what Mr. Jones says about the business plan and how it's went through our business side at the council, but you spoke very much on experience of visitor centres not operating. I don't know if it's worth it if some of that information could be supplied to the planning committee, maybe as if we have to request it, or is it something you could just supply so that then we can consider that, because it's obviously considering the round it's on this application.
Yeah, we're more than happy to supply what we've got. I think one of the challenges we had when we were working with the agent at Ironside Farah was trying to find a like-for-like property. We run a number of visitor centres, but we can certainly pull some. I think we've pulled information together for the report for the agent, but we will pull some more together and see what else is out there in the industry.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Maxwell. I will just confirm, Mr. Jones, that doesn't mean I don't believe the business plan that's put there. I would just like to see the two sitting together so that when we're actually making a decision, we can actually look at that. The next one goes to Ian Henderson, who is from our legal department. And again, I appreciate what Mr. Jones, and there's a legal letter supplied. Our guidance, obviously, on the committee is through our Mr. Henderson. My concern is, and I get what was said earlier on about younger people taking over, but my concern is the resale of properties. Fine, I can see where you can control and only sell to people over a certain age when you're initially selling. And I think in the first planning application we looked at, I'm almost certain there was a lot of concern made about whether we could actually legally hold that. So could we make sure, sorry, could you possibly please, that's probably a better way of saying it, make sure there's quite a bit in our quite definitive information on that for the planning committee when we go forward, because I think it is, how could you say, a bit of a game changer one way or t'other, and I think it's very, very important that we have that information, and it's something which we can stand by whichever way the information goes.
Thank you, Councillor Rouse, and indeed that was a point that was noted from the last predetermination hearing. So further information will be given on means of enforcing in terms of title deeds and also matters such as conditions and planning permissions. So that information will be brought forward in the officer reports. Thank you, Councillor Rouse.
Okay then, is that you finished, Councillor Rouse? We'll go back to Councillor Murtagh.
I'd be pleased to hear yes.
Fine, okay, Councillor Murtagh.
Yeah, you'd be not so pleased to hear that I'm coming back in. It was on this, I suppose, a supplementary, both on what Councillor Bowes has just said and Councillor Redmond. And absolutely, I know that our legal department will provide us with the evidence on their opinion about the burdens and how they're enforced and in terms of occupancy. But it was just because the agent, Mr. Jones, he's mentioned that in his, you know, and I think you mentioned a specific previous development and the legal opinion. Are we able to see the basis of that legal opinion? Because basically what I would like to ask you, considering you're putting it forward, is what that has looked at in terms of equalities. Councillor Forrest mentioned about, for example, other children, older children living, but given that part of your marketing here is to say that these are properties for over 55s. So I wonder whether your equalities assessment and legal advice has looked at that aspect of, for example, the elderly population often have people come to care and live with them. So the rights of those, the rights of the older people themselves to have younger people come and live with them, and also the rights of pregnancy and maternity that are protected characteristics. So you can't restrict pregnancy and maternity as protected characteristics, and over 55s can have children. So whether we're able to see the entirety of your legal advice so that we can look at that and see whether that's considered in the opinion that you're giving forward.
Convener, if I can just come back on that particular point.
Yeah.
Our legal officers, our legal people have presented a case to your own officers who will inevitably have some interpretation on that. I'm sure you'll get a full report in time, but as far as we're concerned, we have provided the information that was necessary to support our case, and I'm sure the planning report, when it eventually comes to committee, will have the answers that you're looking for.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Have we any other questions at this stage from members, or can we move on to the next part? Okay, that takes us to item 6 here, which is the convener invites other persons who have submitted representations, including objectors or supporters. Now, I know that we've got a number of objectors here, so I'm going to bring in, is Graham Henderson there? Graham? Graham Henderson? Yes, would you like to start off with the objectors? You've got 5 minutes, sir.
I would, thank you very much. And for those not present at the previous predetermination hearing, I'd like to recommend that most persons go back and view that, just to get a sort of picture and the history of how we've got to this point. Yeah, and before I start, I'd just like to make the point quite clear as well, in terms of us providing a comprehensive response to the points raised by the applicant, which have had sort of 6 months to raise these points. We've had 8 days maximum, circa less than that, due to a sort of link issue accessing the report. So to make a comprehensive response to all those points, we feel we've been compromised in being able to do that. But we have pulled together a response which I'll get into just now. So I guess, so why are we here? We're here because the initial application for 12 bungalows and now I see an unwanted visitor centre indicated that there was a requirement for a roundabout, and the costs for that roundabout then stimulated a requirement for an additional 60 bungalows stretching something like 2 kilometres from the Pineapple. That takes me, that's fundamentals of why we're here now in the development. So where this raises 4 sort of objections for me. So initially, non-compliance with the LDP2, detriment to the amenities in the area and the environment at the Pineapple, There's the impact on schools, which has been addressed in the report, but I'd like to say something about, and then there's the National Trust objection as well, which I've heard a bit about tonight. So we know that this is out with the LDP2, and the LDP2's only been pulled together for 2 years now, spanning 20 years going forward. We know it's out with that. But I'd like to just talk at high level about the scenery we're talking about here, enjoyable by everyone in the area. So the residents nearby, Douglas Avenue, Castleview, Brucegate, Airth in general, I've spent sort of 16, 17 years now, and that's sort of walk up to the back of the church, up Main Street, round the back where we're talking about, by the LDP2 area, and also by the current situation where they were proposing to build 82 bungalows. It has been essential for people's well-being. Families have enjoyed it, dog walkers, exercise, people in general have enjoyed that. Those views as part of the LDP2 are going to be taken away as part of that, to the north, to the Forth, and to the east, to the Forth Bridge. Now, this application then is looking to then build 82 bungalows heading along the sort of south and west towards Stirling here. So those views in those areas are going to be sort of destroyed from a sort of well-being perspective, where houses will be built. That, if I think back to the pandemic, those areas were essential for people walking. See, this is prime land in Airth where people go to enjoy themselves, and very soon we're going to have 108 houses along here, but then in future we're now talking about adding another 82 as well. So that will be, that facility will no longer be there. The other thing I'd like to sort of move on to is sort of detrimental impact in the area. So I guess in terms of when schools come into this, the roadway in Airth, we already have the residents where we're supporting a 20 mile an hour speed limitation in this area. Now that is pre the 108 houses which have been built as part of the Lockey Castlegate estate. So traffic calming is already desired in that area, and I lived immediately next to the roadway for 15, 16 years, and I can tell you people going to school in the morning think it's already a hazard. And then currently we're expanding that for another 108 houses, so maybe circa another 200 plus cars being 3 to 4 5-bedroom houses. And now we're considering further housing as well, which is over 55, which is on a hill, which will be difficult for people of that age essentially as well. So I think we have to give some consideration to that. And also we've spoken about schooling previously, and the school's been at the limits. There's some evidence in the report that says the schools are at 76% capacity, and that's due to fall. However, looking at the capacity report I've seen, I see a different response. I see that the percentage of capacity is due to increase to a peak at 84% in 2024. And Larbarta High School is at 93% capacity, but what we're pointing out, in January it was voted the most overcrowded school in the whole of Scotland at that time, and we're going to then put, potentially a burden of other people going to that. And we've got the 55-year age limit here. I know someone in Airth currently that has 2 children who's over 55 that is in Airth Primary School currently, and in the early years of school at P4, P5. So
your final minute, sorry, Mr. Henderson, your final minute, sir.
Okay, thanks, convener. Okay, so yeah, so that certainly, we've spoke about age there. That can certainly impact on the schools and the management of that. Right, I guess, two final things to raise for me then, I guess. So the Community Council have taken a neutral stance on this, and I thank them for forwarding on our objections to yourself. I appreciate that. But in the list of representations, there is something like 28 people within the Douglas Avenue, Castleview and Brucegate estate, 28 objections to 2 for in that estate, and to the wider Airth area there's 51 objections to 10 supporting. So the ratio of support to against this is greater than 5 to 1. So today I've submitted a request to the Community Council to reconsider that neutrality, because the neutrality was based on not being able to have a group public meeting. So I've requested, based on the conditions changing, that we go and review that, and we have a public meeting to look at, you know, that neutrality by comparison with formal applications that's there. And I mean, I guess I touched on the views there. It's also worth pointing out that the objectors come from far away here. I know we talked about this last time, but the objections come from Banshire, from Glasgow. The people that are completely unaffected by the development are the sort of supporters of this, whereby we've got a ratio of greater than 5 to 1 against it inside the village. The final point was picked on by one of the councillors there earlier. I sort of missed his name, unfortunately. But yeah, the cost of living rise here, in terms of the viability of a business, we're talking about pressure on people's incomes as a result of the financial crisis, what's going on there. The viability of that business, the income from that business would surely be reduced based on that scenario.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Henderson. I know 5 minutes seem a long time, but the fact is that everybody has to get an opportunity to speak. Mr. Jones, you will know that you have an opportunity to come back in when everybody's spoken to address any comments that's been made. Now, I think it's Mr. Laurie. Mr. Laurie, you want to come in, sir?
Yes, thank you very much, convener.
Thank you, sir.
And I will be very brief this time. First of all, I'd like to start with an apology to actually Graham, because due to logistics, I couldn't make the pre-planning meeting that we had on Tuesday. So apologies for that. I may necessarily go over some ground, but I think it's worth reiterating what it is. I only have 3 points to basically make or bring to the attention of the meeting. First is the contradiction to the LDP 2. The proposal that was submitted by George Russell Construction was not contained within the Council Development Plan, the Local Development Plan 2, which was only adopted on the 7th of August. And this plan was there to take the housing requirements up to 2040. We've already heard that, I think, from Graham made that themselves. I mean, assuming that the planning process was you know, the robust, we can't understand the fundamental change why something that was not suitable in 2000 is now suitable in 2022. There's nothing. I mean, we talk a lot about the business plan, but what I would like to know is more detail about any background fundamental need that's changed and why it wouldn't be acceptable in 2020, but should be acceptable in 2022 in this expanded format. Yep. So that's one point. The second point, again, it's similar to that. This scheme has been rejected twice, as far as I understand the planning process. And my apologies to all you planners there, they obviously know the process more than I do. But the original scheme, which had 22 units, it was reviewed within the LDP2 process, and it was not adopted. Yeah. It then went to what appears to be something that went through the Scottish Government Examination Reporter, if I read the reports right, and it went for his or their review, and again, it was not adopted. One of the reasons it was stated within that was that the original development, which was for 22 units, would, as quoted from the report, does not or would not outweigh the landscape harm that this scheme is producing. And that was a scheme for 22 developments. We're now talking about 82. So Graham's already mentioned about the impact already in that precious piece of land that we have adjacent to Earth that dog walkers and everyone enjoy. The new expanded development of 82 units will naturally inflict considerably more landscape harm, to use the terminology of the reporter, and therefore it will provide more detriment to the local community. The third, again, I'm just picking up a little bit on what Graham said, was the depth of local objections to this scheme. Yeah, The local parish council, I think, following up from Graham, was neutral. I did a very similar analysis to Graham in terms of looking at the list of representations which were in the meeting, the report for this meeting. And again, if you filter out those from out with the 8th parish council boundary, I came up with a very similar number, Graham, you'll be glad to know. There's a 5-to-1 ratio of objections in the local community. Yeah, you mentioned that there are people from Glasgow, there's people from Kent voicing support, but it's quite clear that the locals are primarily against this development, because we can see the detrimental harm that it will do to this. So in association to just making this meeting aware, we would ask that, given this demonstrated strong local objection, we would request that the 8th Parish Council reconsider their neutral position to one of being against, to reflect the local residents' views. So,
wind
finally,
up, sir.
Sorry?
If you could wind up, please. Actually, 6 minutes, you're over your time.
I'm very sorry. Could I have maybe 30 seconds more?
I carry on, just wind up, no problem.
Right, I'll just say, finally, looking through the papers, we believe the whole situation can be was summarised, and I'll summarise it again, as a thinly veiled investment in a local area to provide a privately owned commercial enterprise under the guise of a visitor centre to buy permission to build non-required homes in a designated countryside area to the detriment of the local community and environment. Thank you very much for your consideration, Convener.
No, thank you very much. And once again, like Mr. Henderson, we've got to apologise maybe for rushing you along, but there's so many people want to speak that we gave a time slot for everybody. Now, can you tell me, Mr. Laurie, is Shona Laurie going to be speaking?
No, so you can have that time back, Mr. Convener. Thank you.
I can have that time. Fine. Now, is Suzanne Williamson or Martin Williamson there?
Hi, Convener, Suzanne Williamson's here.
Oh, fine, thank you. If you would like to carry on, you have 5 minutes to put your objection forward to the committee. Thank you very much.
I'm not going to repeat the objections that both Graham and George have outlined today. The only other extra thing that I would add is the congestion in traffic going through Airth Village is considerable at the moment. So the volume of traffic is huge, and it will only be exacerbated whether the homes are built for age 55-year-olds or not, because most housing developments have at least one car. The other situation that I would like to point out is that we have a very, very limited bus service. So looking at housing for over 55s, once you get into perhaps age 65 or pushing on, they're still able to enjoy their houses, but many people then resort to public transport. The public transport infrastructure around about the village is not substantial, if we would say. Indeed, I think it's, as I say, at the weekend, it's even less. So that's putting even more burden on kind of private transport. And as Graham mentioned, there is an initiative regarding a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit that's going through at the moment, but it's also talking about the impact on airflow, air quality around about the village. So the new houses are certainly going to add to that. And the final thing that I would just like to say is an over 55-year-old age bracket puts an unhealthy burden on a small village where already there are considerable elderly people within that. And I don't think that the village, whilst the health service might be able to take it from a capacity issue, I don't think that burden should be placed on a small village such as Airth. I think that that we don't have the infrastructure in place to do it. And so on that basis, I am objecting. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. Is Martin Williamson going to be coming?
No, no, it will just be me tonight. So I'll release another 5 minutes back to you.
Okay, fine, thank you. Now, we have objectors who've confirmed their attendance, but they're not requesting to be heard. But just for our own sake, Pauline Roger, have you been on listening, Pauline? I think Pauline's there. And Stuart MacDonald,
Yes, I'm on.
You're on. Okay then. That's fine. It's just to let you know that we've had your name here, that it's stated clearly that you're confirming attending, but you're not requesting to be heard. Is that correct?
Yeah, as we had a small meeting, as Graham highlighted earlier on in the week, and most of the points he's brought was discussed, and we all are.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much, sir. Now, it's an opportunity now, because that's all the objectors, there's an opportunity now for the agent to come back in and reply to any of the points raised by any party heard by the committee. But there's always a but. You don't introduce any new material. You're only there, you've been taking notes of what's been said. If you want to come in with any of the points that the objectors have raised, then you've got another few minutes to do that. Okay, sir? You're on mute again, Mr. Jones. Okay, carry on.
Convener, you can hear me now?
Can hear you now, sir. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Convener. I will be as brief as I can and pick up as many of the points that I've made notes on. First of all, I commented in relation to the local development plan process. It was evident from the reporter's conclusions that the reporter at the time was not convinced we provided sufficient evidence to justify the release of this land or provide the visitor centre. I've made commentary in answer to a councillor's question later on. I think it was on the basis that the 16 detailed studies that we provided through the two applications, the original one for 22 bungalows and now this one for the larger number, points to answering as many of the questions as possible. If, for example, the reporter had this weight of information at the time, we may have come up with a different conclusion. What I would say to you, though, is that the previous planning committee in June of 2020 looked at the first application and took a decision in favour, or they took a decision minded to approve the application on the basis of what they had before them at that stage. So it's not a static process. It's not a once and for all decision. I would further make the point that the council area, Falkirk area, is currently running a shortfall in their required 5-year housing land supply. So this development, bringing forward 82 units, would help bridge that gap. I would also point out that 21 of those units would be handed to the council or its agents as part of the council's affordable housing policy, which may...
Remember, Mr. Jones, remember, no new material. You're here specifically at this point to answer any questions in relation to what people have been saying, objectors. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm closing my statement on the basis of the local plan process. I think I've rebutted that to a large extent. The loss of amenity space is something which has to be viewed in the basis of what is required and need versus what we have by way of open space. We've taken the view that we've provided information which would satisfy our development long term. Traffic calming will be assisted as part of our proposals that we're putting forward. We're introducing a roundabout at the north of the village, which you've heard from the traffic engineer will be of assistance to slowing traffic both moving north and south. And the congestion and bus services, we are actually making a contribution to public bus services. We've already set out our terms in discussion with your officers on the basis of assisting the provision of a Sunday bus service. It isn't there at the moment, and it's something which we, as part of this development package, will try to assist with. So that's as much as I'd like to take through on the basis of points made, Convener, and I will come back as a final statement in terms of summing up.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. It's an opportunity for the committee to question any party heard by the committee, or they may seek guidance on factual or legal matters from council officers after each presentation. Is there any member who would like to come in and ask any question of anybody at this particular point? Or have you got enough information to be going on with to drop the core committee and get Councillor Kerr?
Thanks, convener. It's a question for Mr. Henderson. With your indulgence, Mr. Henderson, at your first statement, you mentioned unwanted visitor centre. You are definitely against this visitor centre, even though if there were no houses there, you wouldn't want the visitor centre.
When I referred to the unwanted visitor centre, I meant unwanted in the sense of unwanted by the National Trust for Scotland. They're against this, and I'm sure Mr. Maxwell could say otherwise. My personal view is that I could personally see this failing and being a building that was just there, you know, as a structure with no running cafe, with I don't know, an eyesore on the structure, which is currently countryside essentially. Yeah, that's sort of my position on the visitor centre.
Okay, thank you very much. And probably a caveat to something that you mentioned. I've got family and friends who have lived in the old Earth other days, and things change. I remember them didn't want the houses up the top and the houses further out by the football park, but life goes on, and fortunately or unfortunately, houses were built. So, but thanks for your honesty, Mr. Henderson.
No, not at all. It's maybe worth saying the largest objection which I have is to the housing. I don't object to the visitor centre as much as the housing, because I can see, you know, the visitor centre being some, you know, there's maybe some positives there for the visitor centre, although we've listed out the negatives. But the bungalows striving 2 kilometres from that to my opening statement, as you mentioned, was why are we here? To justify the finances for the original application, which was 22 bungalows plus a visitor centre. The cost of that roundabout, which, you know, there's the debate of the National Trust for Scotland are indicating they're objecting to it. We are here to try and justify, or this additional 60 houses is to justify the cost of that roundabout, and those additional bungalows are just unjustifiable.
Thanks, Mr. Henderson.
No,
thanks, convener.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Jones, just coming back to you for a minute, just to let you know, sir, that there's no opportunity for you during this process to wind up. You had your opportunity to speak. You also had an opportunity to answer any questions. And the fact is that the process quite clearly is now left in the hands of the members. It's just to clarify that position. And if you look at the plan and predetermination here in procedure, you will see that I'm 100% accurate. Now, members, is there any other member like to ask any question of anybody that they've heard this evening, including any of our officers?
Sorry, convener, are we moving on to the next part where we can ask officers, or are we just crossing out, like asking officers for more information, basically, on the next section?
Well, it's just we're finishing off the bit in relation to the any factual matters. I know where you're coming from, because we're going to highlight some of the areas I'd like to see in the report.
Yeah, one bit of clarity, I suppose, and I don't know whether this is in the next bit or not, so indulge me and forgive me. It was just that Mr. Jones there in his summing up, or his riposte to the points raised by the objectors, mentioned that roads, saying that in response to traffic congestion, I wonder whether roads could come in. It's the roundabout. The roads officer, I think it was Craig Russell, just said that he could say it was likely that it might reduce the speed, you know, might impact, but in terms of the congestion, in terms of numbers, that's not what was being said. It was just if you could, because I think there was a bit of confusion there, but the officer was saying, they could confirm, was saying it's likely as much as they could say that it could reduce speed, but the impact that what was being made was that an additional 82 houses would create more traffic, and there was no nothing that was saying that it was going to help with the volume of traffic, I suppose.
Right, we'll bring Craig back in. That's a valid point. And that's still, we're on questions at item 9. We're not at the stage there, the final area, where we'll ask the council consider some of the areas that we've been discussing tonight, like the discrimination, the age, different areas. So, Craig, you want to come back in with that question from Councillor Murtagh?
Yeah, there's two parts to this. The first part is to say that the council's transport planning unit would assess the traffic impact from this development. So I have no comment on the number of vehicles that will come from this development. Just to expand a little on my comment about the likely impact that the roundabout may have on vehicle speeds. This is an application for planning permission in principle. Yes, it shows a roundabout. It shows a roundabout in a certain position. The roundabout may not be built in that position. It may be smaller than it's shown on the drawing. It may be larger than it's shown on the drawing. So there are too many unknowns at this stage, and possibly even once we do have the detail, to be absolutely categorical to say this will absolutely slow traffic speed. My position on this is that it's still that it is likely to do. That's my professional opinion. That's as an engineer and as a driver as well. When you encounter a roundabout, you typically slow down.
No, thanks for that, convener. I'm just reading point 9 about on the procedure and saying about committee may seek guidance on factual or legal matters from council officers after each presentation. I suppose one of the main questions is and Mr. Henderson's already been asked it, about the enforceability of the of the burden and how that would actually apply, and how occupancy would relate to that, and enforcement of whose occupancy. I know that we're going to get that in the final report, but I suppose I wondered whether Mr. Henderson had any comment in terms of what's already been said from both the objectors and the agent, in terms of the kind of things that were cited there about precedent and how that would apply, or whether we'll just get all that in the final report.
Thanks, Councillor Murtagh. It's a good question. You will get information on that in the final report. What I would say is that your burdens are not uncommon in title deeds, and they are particularly effective in the case of a sale, because a purchasing solicitor's agent will look at the title deeds and report to their client and to banks and so on. So they can be effective. As I think, as I noted at the last fee determination hearing, the council is not a party to what is in the title deeds, so it doesn't have an enforcement role in terms of title burdens and conditions. But there will be a fuller response to that in the report that will come before Planning Committee.
Thanks, Mr. Henderson. I think that's hopefully the response in the plan report will contain the questions about particularly about occupancy, and also about what, given you just said there in your legal opinion about the council not having an enforceability role on those burdens, therefore how the other policies would apply. For example, if children or those under 55 did come to live in there, what would actually be the effect? So I'm hoping that all that will be contained within the report, but I think it's really useful to just air that here so that we can kind of understand what it is we're looking for as a committee on that legal question.
You're 100% correct. That takes us into item 10, which is members of the committee identifying any other planning issues that they wish to see addressed in the report to the meeting of council that will consider the application. But it's no council now, it's obviously just the planning committee. So I think you've started the ball rolling. So is there any other member there have anything that they would like to speak to any of the council officials or Mr. Henderson in relation to the report that's going to be coming at the planning committee? Now, I would say at this stage that there's no date being set for the planning committee that will hear this, because obviously there's a lot of information coming forward, but that will come out as soon as possible. There's also going to be an opportunity, especially for newer members of this committee, to go on site and they have an opportunity to look. Some members who've been previously on the committee and were at the predetermination hearing and the 20th have already been in site, but there is going to be an opportunity, and I would ask that the new members take it. Other than that, has there anybody else got anything, any of the members got anything to say that they would like to be considered in this application on the report? Councillor Kerr, then we're back to Councillor Murtagh. Thank you.
Thanks, Convener. Can I get, it'll probably be education. If, like Councillor Murtagh has indicated and Councillor Redmond indicated, if these 82 bungalows, if there were people went to live with somebody, and as we say, we can't enforce that, how would that impact? I know it says it's 74% in school capacity in Earth. Would the 82, if these were normal houses, would the 82 houses or bungalows impact on the school capacity then?
And I think that was a point, Councillor Kerr, that was perhaps raised at the last predetermination hearing. Sorry. So it is something that we'll be picking up in the report.
Okay.
We'll come to the planning committee. But thanks for the question. That's appreciated.
Thank you. Any other questions? We'll be heading back to Councillor Murtagh. Councillor Murtagh.
Thanks, Convener. And just to pick up on that point that James, Councillor Kerr, sorry, we're being formal tonight, was saying there. I did ask for that information, and it is in the update report. There is a bit more information in that, but what I would like to ask officers is, having read the update report, and what it says is in recent years the school roll has settled at around 75, and then it looks at the next 5 years, and they've said, you know, it's expected to drop to 70%, etc., etc. But what I would like to ask education to do, and I declare as the education convener the slight interest in this, but the current document, which is the Education Planning Capacity Statement for 2022, actually has Earth Primary expected to be at peak of 85% in the next years. That's the current document, and Larbert High at 99%. So I think that's it's just to make sure that officers then go back and reference. It is referenced in the report that Earth Primary has no additional capacity to build in that, so it's in the education capacity statement about how carefully that's monitored, but the two documents seem to be slightly at odds, so it would be good to have some clarity and to make sure that there is somebody from education at the planning committee, so that we, if we do have questions about that, that we can look at that, because I think that looking, and as I understand it, at supplementary guidance and the ratios, and these are all houses, so it would be the ratio of the pupil product ratio. My maths is slightly different to what's in that report, so I would like to make sure that that's properly clarified. So that's my first ask. And again, with Larbert High, it's predicted to be at 99% capacity, and I think we had that confirmed in the planning report yesterday in relation to another plan application. So again, it would be good to understand that. The NHS, I know there's nobody here from the NHS tonight, so I couldn't really ask this in the thing, so perhaps officers could go back to the NHS. What's said in the update report is that the practice at Flynn, which is obviously for those who are not familiar, in Stirling district, the practice at Flynn is open, but then it goes on to note about the situation where, but they don't have to register people, new patients who are already registered in Stennismuir if they move into the area. So I think it'd be good for that situation to be explained in the planning report, and maybe I don't know whether it's possible that officers come out to NHS to try to tease out that situation or explain it to members. Obviously, I understand it very well, being a local resident and registered at Flynn. But I think particularly because of the context of the plan application being for over 55s, a situation where having to go to Stirling, not to Airth, but to Stirling, and potentially not having to even register there is probably quite important to planning application. So perhaps if that could be explored. I think the other asks around equalities issues, around the sort of planning environment are to come. But the one thing that perhaps maybe could be embroidered or better explained, there's a section in the update report about housing need, and there was discussion about effective housing land supply, and this came up again yesterday in our previous planning meeting. Perhaps officers could prepare how that relationship is playing out in terms of it's saying what's identified in the housing need for the type of housing being affordable housing, and that the shortfall being affordable housing, but that's not necessarily related to the housing land supply. I know we're going to have a briefing as members, but perhaps for this particular report, in case it happens before, a kind of an explanation of that particular point in relation to the housing that's proposed could be included. So they're really my main points. I think everything else is already there to be picked up in the report, so happy with that.
Okay. Thank you for your input there. Councillor Sinclair. Councillor Sinclair, are you muted?
Yeah, convener, can you hear me okay?
We can hear you fine, sir.
Yeah. Thank you very much, and thanks to everybody who's made contributions so far. I think in terms of the environmental impact on this one, because of the site location and things like that, I know that there'll be more kind of detailed analysis of the environmental impact coming forward. I would like there to be a bit more information or a bit more of a focus on, in particular, the impact on biodiversity in the area. I think there's an incredibly important kind of site there, and I know that there are some protected species around there. Obviously, that could potentially have an impact. Any development could have an impact on that, but I'd like to see a bit more of a focus on that, please, if that would be okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Forrest, you want in now?
Yes, please, convener.
Yes, sir.
Just to add on from Councillor Sinclair's request for a bit more information environmentally. Craig Russell said earlier about the likelihood of the roundabout slowing down the traffic, which all in favour of, but if we could have a wee look and see what the likelihood of the air quality from the emissions of the traffic, because obviously as they slow down, they're travelling through Airth, and the congestion of the traffic is likely to build up, and so is the likelihood of emissions. So if you could possibly see your way to getting something regarding that.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Councillor. Councillor Colley, and then I think Councillor Murtagh has got something else. Councillor Colley.
Yes, thank you. Apologies, my camera's not on. We're having real technical problems. So I just wondered about the appropriateness of seeking further information around health resources. We mentioned about the NHS Forth Valley saying that there wasn't necessarily an issue around capacity and health services, and that may well be the case. But I suppose I was wondering a little bit wider than that around a social care provision as well, and whether it would be appropriate to have some information from the Health and Social Care Partnership around whether this would have or would not have any implications around that wider in the wider health bracket.
Okay, Thank you for that. We now have back to Councillor Murtagh. Councillor Murtagh.
It's sort of a question that might kind of come up in the report. I don't think Mr. Perry is going to like me here in particular if I'm mentioning this. It was raised by the objectors or the residents about they've themselves written to Ayr Community Council and I went to request a meeting, and I suppose what we would expect to see in the report that comes forward whenever it comes forward is potentially updated information from statutory consultees, for example, and Ayr Parish Community Council being one of them. As I understand that community council elections are currently nominations are open. There's an advert for you. The nominations are open from yesterday, and it's whether then the report should contain a kind of clear progression of, well, this is what the community council submitted previously. There may not be a community council in existence at the time of the current when the report comes forward. I don't know when that is, but maybe it's just something that needs to be kind of put in the report. I know that the obviously residents have requested something, but it might not be that we can get a full and accurate picture of up to date. So maybe I don't know whether Mr. Perry would be able to advise, or whether there would be something that could be included in the report to make sure that members were aware of that situation. Okay, that is a really interesting one, because as you say, the elections are taking place at the minute and people are putting their names forward. Okay, is there any other member would like to come in? We're on a situation at 10 members of the committee are identifying other planning issues. We've got numerous ones that have been given to officers. Really interesting ones. Have we anybody else coming in? Because if not, I'm going to close this meeting. First of all, could I thank everybody that's taken part here. I think it's been a very worthwhile, open and transparent debate here this evening. I'd like to thank obviously Mr. Jones, the agent for the applicant. I'd like to thank all the consultees that have attended, whether they've spoken or not. I'd also like to thank the objectors who came and gave up their time to say their piece on behalf of their community, and for those who did attend but didn't want to be heard. Other than that, there's no date, as I said already, there is no date yet confirmed when this will come before the planning committee, because members still have an opportunity to go to site, but there's so much information that will need to be gathered by officers that it could take some period of time to ensure that all the information that's been requested and required will come before committee members so that they can take a decision based on factual information. Other than that, good night to everybody, and thank you very much for your attendance. Thank you very much.
Thanks, convener.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thanks, convener. Thank you.